Percocets and Loratabs, values, morphine patches, ecstasy, and it's all up for grab. What you want, what you need, hit me up, I got you, man. What you want, what you need, hit me up, I got you, man.
Warning, I chain smoke and I say fuck a lot, but I accept myself for the way I am. I accept you too. Viewer discretion advised.
This is a true story. It was national news when it happened, but it's also part of my story. I guess we'll start off where I live, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, also known as the Redneck Riviera. If you don't know anything about Myrtle Beach, they filmed Eastbound and Down Season 3 here, and believe me, Kenny Powers fits right in. Another thing we're known for is having one of the original, quote, pill mills when OxyContin first came out. I was young, but unfortunately, I got caught up in that scandal. And so did my mother. In the Sun News, October 10, 2021, South Carolina opioid epidemic's history starts at local pain clinic. In June 2001, authorities shut down Comprehensive Care and Pain Management Center and slapped Dr. Woodward and 7 other physicians with federal charges for their unscrupulous peddling of OxyContin, a highly addictive painkiller. 20 years later, the end is in sight for Purdue Pharma, the bankrupt OxyContin maker, often blamed for igniting the country's opioid epidemic. The Sun News is looking back at Myrtle Beach's unique role as home to Comprehensive Care, one of the country's first and most notorious pill mills. The clinic's closure was not the end. An ensuing trial centered on Woodward, the clinic's mafia-connected physician who had a penchant for both assault rifles and powerful pain meds, captivated the nation's attention. Dr. Michael Woodward purchased a building within a year of arriving in Myrtle Beach and opened up the Carolina Neurodiagnostic and Sleep Disorder Center, but he soon realized the profit was in pain, later testifying that many new patients were threatening to leave if he didn't prescribe narcotics. Woodward went along with their request, changing his practice's name to Comprehensive Care and Pain Management Center, but operating the clinic soon became impossible for Woodward to do by himself. South Carolina suspended his medical license in 1996 after he was accused of improper relationships with female patients and overprescribing opioids, preventing Woodward from continuing to write his own prescriptions. So he hatched a plan. He began recruiting and training other doctors to sign off on his prescriptions, eliminating the need for a valid license of his own. The clinic's physicians were prescribing other addictive opioids too, including Valium and Stadol, but OxyContin was overwhelmingly the prescription of choice. U.S. drug enforcement officials had closed Comprehensive Care by suspending the physicians' medical licenses, and now law enforcement was rounding up the, quote, Myrtle Beach 8, as it would be referred to in media coverage. 7 of them were easily found and arrested, including Dr. Woodward, who had moved to Florida with his wife and 3 kids to, quote, escape the pressures of his profession. But Sutherland was still at large. Investigators sought the assistance of the U.S. Department of State and found that she had received a permit to work at a health clinic in a small village in New Zealand, and she was taken into custody there. Authorities were able to successfully extradite Sutherland in December of 2002, shortly before the trial was set to begin, and she decided to plead guilty, becoming the 4th doctor from the clinic to do so, joining doctors Benjamin Moore, Thomas Devlin, and Venkata Palavarti. Those 4 were expected to testify against their former colleagues as a part of their plea agreements, but Moore never made it to trial. Facing up to 45 years in prison, the 44-year-old committed suicide while living with his mother in North Carolina. Quote, theoretically, if the penalty were mandatory death sentence, then I would rather go to trial, Moore wrote in a letter, explaining his decision to plead guilty. Quote, I'm not as afraid of death as I am loss of freedom. Dr. Moore was my doctor when I was 18. He prescribed me pretty heavy painkillers for the first time, and a lot of them. Not OxyContin, but strong enough for me. I went there until they closed down, and I had always heard that he shot himself, but apparently I found out recently he hung himself, and the head doctor, Dr. Woodward, was my mother's doctor, and he prescribed her some pretty heavy painkillers. Moore gained notoriety after his death, becoming a symbol of the, quote, war on doctors movement. Its advocates argued that government officials were wrongly placing the blame for the opioid epidemic on physicians like Moore. They warned that unnecessary prosecutions of doctors who were acting in the best interest of their patients would discourage others from treating chronic pain. The movement spawned online forums, protests, and books during its early 2000s heyday. Honestly, I liked Dr. Moore. He actually came to one of my concerts to watch me on stage because of my posture as I played guitar, and he was also a guitar player. With the trial approaching, the doctors who already pled guilty were painting Woodward as an intimidating figure. A cache of 21 guns, including at least 5 AK-47 military-style weapons and 17,000 rounds of ammunition investigators confiscated from Woodward's office, enhanced the perception that he might be dangerous. I've been in that office with my mother. It was upstairs at the Pain Management Center. I didn't see any guns. Authorities never received an explanation as to why he kept so many guns in his doctor's office. Woodward had also warned his employees that he was connected to the mafia. A DEA investigator later testified. That assertion turned out to be true. He was leasing space within the clinic's building to an MRI scanning company run by Joseph Locascio, whose brother served as second in command for the famous New York mobster John Gotti, court records show. Woodward provided evidence against the business in an effort to reduce his prison sentence. Locascio and others associated with the business would plead guilty to healthcare fraud after paying Woodward more than $300,000 in kickbacks to refer patients for unneeded MRI scans. The three remaining physicians, Dr. Ricardo Allaire, Deborah Bordeaux, and Michael Jackson, now had to grapple with their former boss serving as the prosecution's key witness. A guilty verdict. Taking the stand on the fifth day of trial, Woodward laid out in a vivid detail his alleged scheme, which netted the practice about $6 million from 1997 to 2001. Each of his fellow doctors had an important role to play, and the three staring daggers at him now had all implicitly agreed to be, quote, part of the team, he recalled. Facing cross-examination from the defense, Woodward estimated 15 to 20% of patients had real issues that benefited from the narcotics, but they would have been purely coincidental because every patient was treated the same. The proof was soon everywhere. Other local doctors were understandably wary of filling the pain clinic's void. Comprehensive Care's abandoned patients filled emergency rooms, suffered through painful withdrawals, or buying cheaper alternative narcotics off the streets. Quote, there were lots of people whose lives were ruined as a result of the opiate climate back at that time. Yes, it was, including us. Our lives were ruined at the time. And we did what we could for a few years until they opened a methadone clinic here, the Center of Hope. And we started going there in early 2004. And 12 years later, we finally got off that. The end. Fucking stoned.
I got money.